Yeah. He'll catch one for y'all here in a minute for sure. We got a good stretch back here behind us we'll get to in a minute.
What's up, y'all? Welcome back to Fish the Moment live stream. Got the crew on here today. Got Matt Steffen, Matt Becker, and then Spencer Shuffield's actually fishing live right now, so we may get some live fishing action. We kind of got a lot of stuff going on in the stream, but it's going to be a pretty information-packed show, I think. We're going to get a lot of different opinions rolling, and so I'm excited to have everyone on, but appreciate everyone taking the time to join me today.
Anything
Awesome.
for you, Johnny.
Yeah,
Thanks, man.
I'm excited to talk some fishing. I'm curious. You wouldn't really tell me what this is about. You're like,
I think he wants to get us in. He wants to get us in trouble.
I think so. Yeah, he's like, yeah, you get to research nothing. You're just gonna just blurt out whatever you're thinking whenever I ask a question. So this should be good.
Hopefully it goes well. We'll see. So before we get into that, I want to give a huge shout out to the sponsor of all the Fish the Moment long-form content, and that's Bridgeford Foods. Bridgeford's been a long-time sponsor of the Fish the Moment live stream, podcast, all of those things. So if you guys want to check out a great brand that supports bass fishing, check out some Bridgeford beef jerky in your local Walmarts, dollar stores, gas stations. It is a great snack, take the lake. It is always in my boat, and especially when it's kind of, cold in the winter, I need to graph around sometimes a little bit more to find some fish, some bait balls, so I can always have a bag of beef jerky while I'm driving around. It always keeps me a little bit warmer, gives me good energy. So huge shout out to Bridgeford, title sponsor of Matt Steffen as well. So great company that supports the sport of bass fishing. Good deal. So let's get into it, guys. There's a bunch of stuff I want to cover in this stream. And to give some context to the viewers, I haven't been making that many YouTube videos recently. We've been doing a lot with Core Tackle, with Matt, Steffen, and it's been going super well. Been crushing it with Core Tackle, but as a result, I haven't been doing as much YouTube content. But I've had a lot of time to sit and think about fishing and the industry and everything, specifically around the impact of forward-facing sonar on the industry. And there's a bunch of stuff that I kind of want to get my head around and get some opinions from some pro anglers on. And before we get, there's so many rabbit holes to go down in this, but I want to give a quick little summary and then some data. So one thing I was thinking about watching a lot of the live coverage and kind of going back and trying to gain knowledge from all the Major League Fishing events that both Matts and Spencer were fishing in the Elite Series is I wanted to learn what these guys are doing. And one thing I noticed is that watching the streams and watching the coverage of the tournaments, it felt very one-dimensional in 2024 in the sense that it felt like everyone was just out in the middle of the lake throwing a minnow, a jerkbait, or like a wacky worm. That was it. And it didn't feel like no matter if you were fishing on Toledo Bend in the spring, you were fishing on a lake, Highland Reservoir Lake, Lake Martin in the summer, or you're fishing up north, everyone was doing the same thing all the time. And it kind of felt a little bit kind of just monotonous. There wasn't a lot of change going on throughout the year. And I know there's been a lot of changes going on in the sport to adjust to that with Major League Fishing and different stuff. But I had some data I wanted to share, and I wanted to get the reaction to this data, and then I'm going to go down all the rabbit holes with you guys. So after watching all the Elite Series events, I tallied up all the top 10 finishes and what the guys were doing in those finishes. And what I found is that 74% of the top 10 finishes came using forward-facing sonar. And of those 74% of top 10 finishes, 84% of them came on a minnow, a jerkbait, or a worm, whether it's a wacky worm or a drop shot. So basically, 70% of all the top 10 finishes came on 3 baits and 1 technique. What are your thoughts on that, guys? Because that blows my mind. I've collected a lot of data for a deep dive app and all this stuff. I've never seen anything like that. That's just like mind blowing that it's that one-sided of a kind of a field.
Yeah, to be honest, it's kind of felt that way fishing the events. I haven't really sat down and looked at the data like you have, but it's certainly felt like that's all you've needed to do over the last year or so. You kind of start rigging up tackle and preparing for an event, and you find yourself rigging up the same 5 rods every tournament, and it's just a couple minnows, a drop shot, a jerk bait or 2, and it's the same no matter where you go. So it really started hitting me probably about middle of the season when we were at the Chowan River, because going into that event, everyone was like, man, that's going to be a power fishing event, cypress trees everywhere. And then we get there and me personally, like that's what I started looking at. And then as practice went on, I found myself just resorting back to minnows on a hover rig. I caught some doing that. I caught most of my fish on a jerk bait and, drop shot, a wacky worm. And I mean, that's how the event was won. And the bulk of the top 10 finishes came from that. So like, that's when it really hit me that it's like, that's what's dominating right now. And that's what you got to do no matter where you go.
Well, I know that Spencer, you've been catching them super well last year, and I feel like a lot of the top tens I've seen you make are kind of on those same techniques. I mean, do you go into the tournament just hunting that technique or hunting those few strategies, or you kind of go into it thinking I'm going to do a bunch of stuff and just kind of end up on that?
Well, I mean, in order to compete, I mean, I go to every tournament, I want to win, obviously. I mean, it's not realistic, but I mean, you're still going to try to find the winning pattern, and I'm out there to do as well as possible. And I mean, there's really nowhere you're going to go except for maybe even Santee Cooper was one scoping, but there's really nowhere you're going to go in the country as good as live scope and live active targets become over the last 2 years, and the way we've dialed it in and the other techniques we've learned to use with it. There's really nowhere you're going to go where you can't figure out a way to catch them doing that. And that's just the way in an every fish counts format. If it'd been a 5-fish deal, I probably would have done stuff a little differently. But being an every fish counts, I mean, you just can't beat scope. Knowing what you're throwing at, knowing that I'm going to put it in front of hundreds of fish a day, that's the deal. And there's just nothing more effective, really, than a jerk bait, a minnow bait, or a drop shot, or a Nico rig to catch those fish. So pretty much anywhere we go, you're going to be able to figure out a way to catch them on one of those 4 or 5 techniques, no matter what.
And Stefan, is that what you did this year too? Picked up those 3 baits? Or were you doing other stuff?
No, I'm not getting to fish with them because I didn't throw it enough, apparently. I mean, yeah, I think you're assuming you did your statistical analysis correctly. I would say that just shows how powerful it is. I mean, I feel like I don't see anything changing. Like, I think that like Spencer said, it's the until something comes along that's either a different technique or a different bait that either works better with forward facing or works better without forward facing, you're probably going to see those handful of baits continue to dominate into 2025 just based on how efficient and effective they are.
Okay, so that was perfect, guys. You teed me up without me saying anything to go off on like 6 different like rants here, so I'm very excited about this. Okay.
I feel like he's setting us up somehow, right?
Yeah,
like
he's just baiting us.
You guys are you set me up on a golden platter for this. Okay, so point number 1, I have like 4 points I want to cover in this stream, and then there's some solutions I want to potentially provide to all this. But first, the whole idea that fishing is becoming one-dimensional, I think, is a literal like major threat to the sport of professional fishing, and this is my opinion, and I want to lay this out to you guys and kind of get your thoughts on this. Okay, so think about it this way. Professional fishing, we all know, is basically a marketing engine to sell products for sponsors. That's how the majority of the money is made in the industry. You can make some money from tournaments, and that's a way to make money, but a lot of it comes from sponsors. And that comes from viewership, people watching the TV shows, watching the YouTube videos, watching these streams. So the reason I feel like a lot of viewers tune in, at least why I tuned in to watch Bassmaster growing up as a kid, was to learn new techniques. I wanted to watch the Beckers, the Steffens, and the Shuffields of the world go on their lakes, these different lakes, catch fish in a bunch of different ways, take that knowledge and bring it back to my lake so I can catch my own fish. And that's, I feel like, what most people are doing. Well, if you have this sport now where forward-facing sonar is at the forefront of everything, there's a couple of things that's, I feel like, a challenge with that. One, it means that once you learn how to do like the minnow technique, the jerkbait technique, and the Nico rig technique, over a few years, so that's what everyone's doing, and that's the most effective thing, and that just continues to dominate, there's not that much more to learn. Or it feels like there's going to be not that much to learn, because I feel like from watching it on live and stuff like that, you don't get all the nuances that maybe you guys are dealing with, like changing the bait length, changing the weight of the bait, working your retrieve a little bit different, changing up water clarities or things, all those little tiny things, because it's harder to see that difference when you're live scoping out in the middle of the lake. Even if they're showing the screen, it's hard to see that compared to, I'm going to go change from fishing docks to fishing riprap to going out in the middle of the lake to flipping grass. it's more obvious for the viewer to actually see all of those changes. So after a while, I feel like the viewers are just going to become less interested in watching because they're like, I know how to go catch them on a minnow now. I'm going to stop watching you guys go live for 8 hours or watch another YouTube video explaining how to minnow again, and I'm just going to go do it myself because I can do it myself. So that's my first point, is I think that it could hurt overall viewership because there's just not enough diversity. There's not enough interesting new things happening. Does that resonate with you guys at all?
I mean, I think there's a lot that goes into it. You know, it's funny, you know, there's definitely an opinion out there that suggests that it's not necessarily the minnow fishing, but it's actually the idea of using spinning tackle. And people are not a huge fan of watching spinning tackle because the fights last a lot longer and it's not as action packed, I guess. You know, I definitely think that there are, and Johnny, you and I have talked about this in the past. You know, if you look at, there's a set number of anglers out there that want to watch live stream tournament fishing. There's obviously a group of anglers that tune it off. I mean, at least they say they're turning it off because there's forward-facing sonar fishing that's taking place. So to me, if you have a group of anglers that are turning it off, and then you have the rest of the anglers are like, well, I'm watching it because I want to watch tournament fishing anyways, you're probably having a reduction of viewership just from the standpoint of you just lost some viewers. Like, I don't feel like we're gaining viewers because, like, I guess let me start over. Say if there's 100 fans out there, the 100 fans are going to watch the tournament live stream regardless. If there was no, I personally think if there was no forward facing, they would say, I'm watching the tournament. I think there's a percentage of anglers that are going to say, I'm not going to watch it because of forward facing sonar. So let's say if 10 of those 100 anglers say, I'm not going to watch it, you're down to 90 viewers. I don't feel like there's additional fans out there that are going to turn on fishing because of forward facing. There's only 100 fans out there to begin with. So if that logic is accurate, then I would feel like it's not helping viewership. You know, I don't think it's a huge percentage of fans. I think the majority of tournament fans watching live stream are pretty diehard fishermen anyways, and the majority of them are probably going to watch one way or the other. They might complain about watching forward-facing sonar, but I still think most of them are going to watch.
So here's a counter argument to that, Stefan. Becker, you go. I got a counter argument to this. But
I agree. I think the majority of the viewers, you know, I don't know what the exact percentage is. I would say probably at least 70% of the viewers are going to watch regardless. Like, those are the hardcore diehard fans. They don't care what the rules are, who's fishing. They just are ate up with tournament bass fishing, and they're going to watch. And then you got that other 30% that could be swayed, you know, one way or the other if they don't like the sonar, or, you know, maybe it's their home lake and they're trying to watch to find locations. You know, they're trying to find new techniques on their body of water, or they're trying to find new spots on their body of water. That, I would say that 30% is where you're probably losing viewers for some fisheries, gaining some for other, but I feel like that's probably the number that you're playing with. And then I think it just so happens that minority is the loudest, and you hear from them the most rather than the hardcore 70%. So that's I feel like that's why it seems, you know, louder than it is. But I don't know. What do you think?
Well, so let me give an analogy, because this analogy I think works really well, and it could change your mind a little bit. And this isn't a perfect analogy, so I'm not saying this is the exact analogy that makes perfect sense, but just hear me out. Let's say that we compare golf to fishing, and tomorrow there's a new golf ball and golf club combination that allows you to hit the middle of the fairway and hit every green 100% of the time. So you never have to worry about missing the fairway, and you hit every green in regulation. But the only stipulation, the only restriction is that the ball can only go within 20 feet of the flag. So now golf is turned away from being golf into basically professional putt-putt, because you can put the ball within 20 feet every single time of the green. Well, you're going to still have a lot of skill involved in putting on PGA Tour greens. There's a lot of factors to take into account: the slope, the grain, the how damp or dry, the wind, all these different factors. And maybe instead of carrying 14 clubs with drivers, wedges, irons, now everyone carries 14 putters, and you have a long putter, a short putter, different head shape putters. And you have all this stuff, so there's still just as much skill. You can't just take a random person off the street and make them a professional golfer. But you might be able to take a 14-year-old putt-putt star and make them a professional golfer and have them compete, because all they have to learn is putt-putt, just putting. And they don't have to worry about hitting bunker shots, hitting out of the rough, hitting out of the trees. And so now you're like, okay, are the hardcore golfers, one, not going to adopt this technology if all the pros are using it? No, they're probably all going to go buy this golf ball and this golf club, and they're going to use it if it's allowed. And then on top of that, are these people going to continue watching professional golf? They might watch it for a bit to see, I want to see all this new stuff with golf and golf 2.0 or whatever. But after a while, is professional putt-putt actually going to be fun to watch for years and years and years? Or is golf fun to watch because you watch a dude hit it in the woods and then have to hit out of a bunker and all this crazy stuff? Like, are you destroying the nature of the game?
I see what you're saying, and that probably, is comparable to actually the act of catching the fish. But what isn't really shown in, say, the live coverage is the act of finding the fish, and that's probably more important than actually catching them. So I mean, if you're talking about the actual catching of the fish, then yeah, that's pretty similar to what you just talked about. But we're not seeing on the live stream the 2 days of practice leading up to that, and or maybe a week of pre-practice before that, to really break down the lake and learn, what's going on under the water and where those fish are sitting. So, the average fan isn't seeing that part of it, that kind of that process of breaking down the fishery and locating where they are. And that's where a lot of the juice is. I feel like that's the entertaining stuff, but that's what people don't want to give up. Every angler kind of has their own system on how they break down a fishery. And, it seems like lately the same 10, 15, 20 guys, figure it out every single time. And, a lot of it has to do with, the equipment for sure, but it's not as easy as just, throwing it on your boat and everyone has it. So, I would definitely agree with that on the, the act of actually catching them and reeling them in. It is definitely simplified things, but you still see the same guys that found the big populations of fish 10 years ago can still find them today. They're just more efficient at it.
I think it's an awesome point, and that's kind of where I wanted to get to by the end of this, is talking about if forward-facing is allowed. If that argument, I don't know if that argument makes sense. I want to kind of get Sheffield and Stefan's opinions on this too, because like the thing about that was so cool is watching you guys fish in the team series. Because in the team series for a Major League Fishing, there was forward-facing sonar that was available, but you guys had to talk through how to find the fish and what to do and what you were doing, and you didn't just pull up on a school that you had found in pre-practice and just start dropping a minnow on them. And that made it interesting, and so it didn't matter about forward-facing sonar or not. And that's kind of where I'm getting at with like the tournament fishing. Is tournament fishing, as long as you're incentivized to win money, you're going to use the techniques that are the most efficient way possible to basically catch the fish. And so if you have forward-facing, and you're going to do that. How do you then make fishing entertaining to watch, knowing that it's maybe not that unique or different when you actually get to the catching part of it? You have to add some other elements in to make it more interesting. That's kind of where I'm trying to get at with this, like different styles of videos or different styles of content. And I think that there's a lot there to be talked about, but no one, I feel like, has found the perfect solution, or maybe there's a bunch of solutions out there. Major League Fishing is going to 2 periods without forward-facing sonar. The team series. There's no forward-facing sonar with the MPFL. There's been the Ultimate Match Fishing. There's all these different formats. I just don't think anyone's ever really figured out the full format, but there's got to be something out there. There's got to be a way to make it engaging and showing the whole process.
I would love to know if the fish catches per angler have increased. Do we know, like, is that data available? Like, can you go back to, say, the BPT from a few years ago and total number of fish caught versus like what it was this past year?
Yeah, all that data is out there. I mean, the only caveat to that is like the first year of the BPT, it was a 1 pound minimum versus 2 pound minimum or what. So you kind of have to
depends on lakes a little bit.
Yeah, you kind of have to have some sort of buffer for that, but all that data is there for sure. And I mean, I'd be curious to see that as well. Johnny's the numbers guy, so I'm sure he'll figure it out somehow.
Well, I do have some numbers on that. I actually ran your numbers from 2023. I already did this for BPT, and this is the one thing that's crazy. So two things. One, I want to respond to some comments in the stream, but I calculated over all, I think it was 8 events from 2023. In the top 3, which you guys were in the top 3, a few of those tournaments, so you're part of these statistics.
Yeah.
On average, it took 20 bass over 7.5 hours.
Wait. 2023 was a 5 fish limit.
Oh, sorry. It was 2024 then. It was this year. Sorry.
I
did this. Sorry. I did this.
I was going to say.
Sorry. So it was last year.
Yeah.
So 2024. So it was, it took 20 fish on average to get a top 3 finish. So top 3 places you need to catch 20 fish on average. But to get in the bottom 10, let's say I guess that would be, if it's 40 field, 29th place, you only needed to catch 4 fish on average. So basically the cutoff from 30th to 40th is catching 4 fish a day, and then top 3 is 20 fish a day. So that means you're only catching a fish every 20 minutes if you look at an 8-hour day. So even though you guys have forward-facing sonar, you're not catching fish every single second. And this was on only qualifying day 1. So this is when you guys were actually trying to catch them, not including the days when you guys were practicing and laying off them. You're trying to get fish in the boat. So I think that that's pretty fascinating from that perspective, that it obviously shows that forward-facing sonar just doesn't make them jump in the boat. There's still a lot of stuff going on there. But that leads to my second point, where I feel like the optics are pretty bad with forward-facing sonar, in the sense that I went and talked to a bunch of my friends, 30 of my friends who weren't fishermen, and I showed them footage of me catching fish on forward-facing sonar, and they're like, that looks like cheating. That doesn't look very sportsmanlike. That's like a weak move. And I think the reason for that is because I showed them a 15-second clip of me dropping a bait. They watched the bait. They watched the fish eat it. They watched them set the hook. They watched me reel it in. And it looks pretty bad when you show that and you don't show all of the other stuff. And at the same time, it's hard to understand the nuances of it. There's a lot of people in the comments who are saying, just show the screen side by side with the angler and it's great. Well, if you show a screen side by side to someone who doesn't know how to use forward-facing sonar, let's say just flipping channels, they're not going to know where your bait is, where the fish is, why you're using the bait you are. And you guys aren't going to be like, you know what, I'm changing to a 1/4 ounce from a 3/8 ounce because the fish are doing this, and I want a bait that has a higher float rate. You guys aren't going to give up all of the juice, and you don't want the broadcasters giving up all your juice either. So it's hard to educate in that perspective, because it's like, I'm sure you guys wouldn't be happy if, the guys on the stream, JT, was breaking down every little minute change you made and saying, this is why Matt's catching them, because then everyone's going to know your stuff. And that makes it tough too.
I think that's the battle that you face with, trying to cover an event, make it educational and entertaining, and then the competitive side of it, where we're trying to get an advantage any way we can, keep a little technique to ourselves, and not let everybody know about it. I mean, look, Spencer's on the water right now. He's trying to figure something out for our first tournament of the year, and he's not going to tell me about it when he figures it out. You know what I'm saying? So there's all that time on the water that you spend. It is to help you catch those fish when you're on the clock in a tournament. That is, why you spend all the time on the water, to learn those little details. And then, to see a fish get caught during those 8 hours that you're on the clock during a tournament, and, to think that it was just easy, because I had a forward-facing sonar. I think that's a little nearsighted. But I agree, to the average person who just clicks it on, doesn't understand what goes on behind the scenes to get there. It definitely doesn't look the best.
And it also doesn't look the best when you have a bunch of 20-year-old kids who are, I'm now 30, so I can call them 20-year-old kids, who are kicking all of the older dudes' butts, to be honest, and they've probably been fishing a 1/4 of the time, and they've only learned forward-facing sonar techniques to the most part. There's guys, I hear these guys say this all the time. I can catch them on a spinnerbait. I can catch them on a jig. There's a difference between catching them on the spinnerbait and being Jason Christie of throwing the spinnerbait. Can you guys agree with that? Like, anyone can go throw a blade down the bank and catch a few fish, but you're not going to do it in a tournament in a best situation. But these guys have become the Jason Christie of minnow fishing in 2 years, which is, I don't think that's also a good thing. It diminishes the skill you guys have as, seasoned anglers.
It's simplified things. I mean, I think it's a combination of everything. I mean, let's be honest. You called them 20-year-old kids. They're spending more time on the water than most anglers do or did. When these veteran anglers were 20 years old, I think the kids now are spending more time on the water than those guys did. So I think it's a combination of both. I mean, you got guys that are fishing every dang day, and if it was a different technique, I think they would be figuring it out just as quick. I think you're seeing a big youth movement. I mean, for years, everyone was, pushing, take the kid fishing, high school fishing tournaments, college fishing tournaments, and you're seeing all of that come to fruition now. And the sport's getting a lot younger because these kids are ate up with it. They're spending all this time on the water. And, it definitely, I feel like it's just a combination right now that it's all hitting at once.
Yeah. Well, I do agree with that. I don't think it's necessarily fair to say that, a 24-year-old kid shouldn't be able to compete with somebody like me who's been fishing for 15 years at the top level. And a lot of that just goes back to how quick is your learning curve. When I didn't really start fishing tournaments until I graduated college, right? So I didn't have high school and college fishing. So if I started when I was 21 or 22, well, if a high school angler starts when they're a freshman in high school, they have 4 years of high school, 4 years of college. That's 8 years. So if I started when I was 21 or 22, 8 years of me fishing local tournaments puts me at 30. Well, I was 30 when I fished my first year on the FLW tour. So to me, and then you throw in the mix, you've got a lot of people out there providing some very, very helpful information on the internet. And, everywhere you look now, it's all the information's out there. So if you were an angler, probably, a lot of the younger guys coming up, if I compare them to myself, I was absorbing everything I could when I was, just starting tournament fishing. And from that aspect, it's like, man, these kids have it all. There's way more information available now than I had. Yeah. I had Bassmaster magazine.
Okay, let's hold on for a second though. Let's keep it 100 here. Do you think if you take all the money that was won over the past couple of years by people who are under 21 years old, if you took away forward-facing sonar from that group, would they have won even half the money they won in the past 2 years? If you took forward-facing sonar away, assuming they're on the lake and they're doing all this stuff, there's guys who are winning Toyota Series championships, $300,000. Are they doing that, winning even half the money without forward-facing sonar technology as a skill that they picked up? If you took that away,
I don't think there's an answer for that. Like you can't take something away once it's there. Like the fisheries have changed so much.
If you look over the years of tournaments, though, there was a whole study that was done where the average age of the Toyota Series guys that were making top 10s were 38 years old. Now it's like 25, 26-year-old, like average age. And that's over a course of a couple of years. And the other data was spanning 20 years. So I don't know. I know I get you're saying you can't say that for certain, but the skill of forward-facing sonar is a very big skill, but when you only have to learn one little element, like only have to learn how to putt, you can be a lot better if you only have to putt versus having to hit out of the fairway and the bunkers and the rough and hitting a driver and all these things and learning course management. There's a lot more you have to learn. So if you only have to focus on one thing for a few years and you can compete with that, that's a lot different than having to master the entire game to be able to be consistently competitive.
I mean, there was Spencer. You got something?
I love forward-facing sonar because I love catching them using it. I mean, it's fun to me. 100%. these younger kids wouldn't do half as well as they do without it. I mean, I can assure you. I mean, it's like me right now. I'm sitting here dragging a jig around on my knees, and I ain't caught one. But if I was on a troll motor looking at live scope, I'd probably done caught 3 or 4 by now. I mean, it's just the way it is. I can put a bait in front of that fish. When you're just aimlessly throwing, the chances of putting it in front of that fish, I mean, if she's 6-7 foot up off the bottom, you know, and I didn't make my cast within 5 foot of her for her to see it, then the chances are she's not going to go to the bottom and eat it. So, I mean, yeah, it makes a difference, no doubt, but that's just technology. I mean, as the human race, and we're moving on, we are expanding our technologies and getting better with things, and it's just hard for me to see us go backwards in the sport of bass fishing. I mean, in 20 years, I just don't even see this being a topic. I mean, forward-facing sonar be what side scan was when it came out 12, 15 years ago. There'll be something so much better that will help us catch fish even at a more rapid pace than we are now. So I just feel like it's, you know, a lot of this, you know, belly aching and griping about it that you hear from a lot of sides is just kind of really pointless in a sense, just because it's going on until state or federal laws change and they do something about it. The local guys and, you know, your BFLs, local tournaments, you're always going to be able to use live scope. And, you know, I mean, you're gonna catch them better with live scope, period. I mean, if you take away your chart, your mapping, sonar, live scope, and everything, we wouldn't catch a fraction of the fish we catch now. I mean, you would be forced going down the bank, throwing spinner baits, crankbaits, chatterbaits, or fishing bluff walls with like a jig and a shaky head and Nico rig. I mean, you can only fish what you can see with your eyes then. But with live scope, I'm able to see in live time what's a mile offshore. You know what I mean? I'm able to use my mapping to find these offshore little nuances and these little juice places. I mean, you can find the juice. I mean, that's just the way it is. But I just don't see it changing. I mean, there's no doubt scope has helped the younger generation be more successful. But I just, you know, like I said, I don't see that changing. I mean, I know we're trying to make a step in that direction this year, but honestly, I see in 3 years that they're going to see that the viewership's not really any better by taking it away, and they're going to allow it again all the time because, I mean, why not? You know, I mean, I fish every day, and I don't watch fishing. I mean, is it more fun to watch a guy jack them on a frog or flipping mats? Of course. I mean, it's the same thing over and over when you're just sitting there watching them, reeling them in, looking at live scope on a spinning rod. But like Matt said earlier, there is so much goes into finding those fish in order to do that. There is such a technique to live scoping. Not anybody is going to get a live scope, put the troll motor in water, and catch them like the guys that have learned it. I mean, there is so much more to it. But it's just a technique that nobody likes to watch. That, in my opinion, not nobody, but I mean, there's no doubt a lot of people don't like watching it. I mean, I don't think any of us could sit here and say that you would rather watch a guy catch him on 65-pound braid and a flipping stick or a frog versus a guy diving a minnow around or a drop shot. I mean, it is more fun to watch a guy jacking them on a big stick. But, you know, when you're actually out there doing it, you know, putting checks in the bank, it don't really matter to me. I mean, I like catching them however I can catch them, you know.
Yeah.
Whatever's the most efficient way, you know, which is going to be live scope, period.
And I agree with I agree with that. And I'm not trying to throw shade at the younger anglers in terms of their skill, because they are extremely skilled, and I want to just make that very clear. Like, I'm not saying that they're not skilled. They have put tons of hours behind it. I'm just saying that it makes the sport more one-dimensional. To Spencer's point, it's if you're watching everyone do the same exact thing, it's not as exciting as if there's a lot of variety. But I do think that this brings us to an interesting point is, okay, let's say that forward-facing sonar is here to stay, and we go down that path. Because I want to go down 2 different paths. Forward-facing sonar is here to stay. We feel like that's where we want to be, bringing the sport forward. I like learning new things with forward-facing sonar. I actually enjoy it. One of the things that irks me the most about forward-facing is I make content about it, and my viewership is super low on my YouTube videos because everyone thinks they see one forward-facing video, they see them all. Because it doesn't look that different to the viewer, I feel like. Even if I'm fishing a brush pile versus standing timber versus a rock pile, someone who doesn't really know what they're looking at, it looks kind of all the same. So what are some ways to make forward-facing sonar fishing and viewership more interesting? And I have some ideas. I want to throw these at you. I'm going to throw multiple ideas, and I want you to get your opinions and maybe figure out how to refine this format. So format number 1, professional fishing. Maybe there's a new tour. Maybe it's just for YouTube, maybe it's whatever. 20 casts fishing. You have the entire day. You can make 20 casts to catch your 5 bass limit. You have to show the screen of how you find it, what you're doing, and every cast literally matters. And whoever has the biggest 5 fish after making 20 casts in a day is the winner of that period. I think that would put so much emphasis on the cast and on the retrieve, the boat position. Where am I finding the fish? Why am I trying to do it? You talk people through it. That, to me, is a way you could potentially make forward-facing interesting to watch without... and you go day of. You don't practice, you don't do whatever. 20 casts all day, biggest 5 fish, winner takes the money. What do you guys think about that concept?
There'd be a lot of zeros.
You think so?
There would be a lot of zeros for sure. It is not that easy to get one to bite, even when everything's perfect. A lot of fisheries, you're making that perfect presentation 20 times to get one bite. A lot of what we do, and, forward-facing sonar, it's all about efficiency. It's making us more efficient. We make that perfect presentation, and it's all just a numbers game. You can just find another fish, find another fish, find another fish. But, it may take, on a good day, you may get 50% of them to bite, and that's like the best of the best day that you're going to have. If you get half of the fish you see to bite, you're having a stellar day.
So what if you ignored all of the random floaters and all that stuff, and you only waited for a big group there, or you saw a fish perfectly on a brush pile, and you're like, I'm going to work this thing over? You don't think you could get 5 fish out of 20 casts if you didn't throw at all of them? You had to pick I have 5 chances to get the right group. I know if you're on a certain ledge or a certain spot, you can drop down and get them one cast in there.
Yeah, potentially. I don't know. I've never really thought about or approached it that way, So that's that would be interesting. I'd like to see you do it, Johnny. You go out and do it.
I'm going to do it. I'm actually these are videos that I'm going to be doing on my channel, because I don't know if it's possible. These are crazy ideas. So I'm throwing stuff out. I'm not saying that this is possible. I'm just saying ways to make it more interesting. Because if you show people finding the fish, if they hooked up, because what you can do with the graphs, they hook up your 2D sonar, down imaging, side imaging, and then your live sonar screen. And so whenever you're going around, show you graphing the bait balls, show you graphing the brush piles, all that stuff, and they have someone breaking down the coverage, like I kind of do in my YouTube videos. Then they show you pulling up, and it's okay, I got to get downwind from these fish because the wind's blowing this way, and I need to, I need to have this perfect bait on so it stays in the strike zone longer. If we went and explained all that, that's perfect made for TV content, and it's interesting if you had 5-6 guys doing that, and then every time someone makes a cast, it's oh, he's making a cast, he's committing a resource. I don't know. I think it's great reality TV, and you could still put money on it, and it's a different format. I don't know, Stefan, what do you think?
I love the idea. But I think you would see zeros, and I think you'd see some 18 of 20 casts. It kind of depends on what the people found, but if you're talking about content or TV to watch, I would watch that.
Yeah, I think.
Think of the betting lines on that. The betting lines would be great, the over/under fish catches. It would be I think, Johnny, I think you should start that, see how it goes, and you could have straight up challenges. You could fish against Spencer, and you'd be 18 to 17 out of 20 casts you guys are catching fish.
Spencer, do you think you could catch a 5 bass limit on 20 casts if you really worked at trying to figure that part out?
Maybe if we were at Toledo Bend or Del Hollow or maybe St. Lawrence River, but about anywhere else I've ever been in the country, no, I think you'd be lucky if you caught one.
So you'd have to pick the lakes pretty specific. You wouldn't be able to just go you wouldn't be able to go anywhere to do it, but
I don't think so, no.
But if you were on those lakes, you could potentially make that work, maybe.
Yeah, 100%. Toledo Bend last year, I could have about guaranteed you on a couple of days, I could have caught 5 bass and 20 casts for sure.
I think if you said, hey, you have 8 hours to make 20 casts, you'd be so much more selective in your casts that you would be catching a much higher percentage of fish than you're thinking right now. I mean, I think if you gave any of the pros, you said you could make 20 casts and that's it, I think there'd be a lot of 5-fish limits caught.
Yeah, but, so I mean, it's difficult to put that bait in the right place to catch that fish. I mean, if we're talking about the Toledo Bend tournament last year, like it may take 2 or 3, 4 casts to get that perfect cast where that fish is going to bite. Like he's swimming pretty fast. Like, that's where the tricky part would come in, and it would honestly it would turn it more into making sure that your casts are perfect. Like it would become a casting contest.
But that's good too, right? Isn't that what you used to be flipping and pitching docks and everything? It was a casting comp in the past. And now it's just fling it out there, cannonball, and hope you hit your target, right?
I mean, it's a little more specific.
I know, I'm exaggerating, but still.
Yeah. But I mean, speaking for myself, like I feel like I'm not the best caster. It may take me 2 or 3, 4 casts to get that bait where it's leading in front of the fish, that he's going to see it before it falls too far, too close to him or whatever it may be. And, it would definitely be different, but you would have to spend a lot of time, preparing, your boat positioning, your casting angle, watching how that fish is swimming and adjusting, your boat and bait to that. There would be a lot of specifics to make sure that you make that one cast and make it count.
So that was one idea to kind of spice it up, I guess, spice up the competition, because I think that's a potential interesting way to do it. The other interesting way, I feel like, and this has been kind of done before, but I still really like the old, like, the Megabucks formats and different things where, like, they would put you on, like, one creek in the lake and you kind of had to go around and find the fish and make it more that style. And that was actually a full-on tournament. And it kind of takes away a little bit of the practice element. I know there was guys who kind of got into some of those areas and practiced. But then showing, with a coverage standpoint, covering where the guys are, what they're doing. My question to you guys, though, is do you feel like the pros would be okay giving up that type of information, like why they're going, where they're going, all that stuff? Or do you feel like it's never going to get to the point where the pros would want that to happen, like giving away all the info? Because I know that that's a sticking point, but I feel like at this point you almost have to give up more info because it feels so one-dimensional with forward-facing. So it's like a give and take, like make it more entertaining to watch, give some more info up to allow forward-facing to happen. Does that make any sense?
Go ahead, Matt. Let's hear what you got to say.
I mean, I just think there's so much information out there already that there's no secrets at this point. I mean, you may have to do a little interpretation on your part and based on what anglers are saying, but the information's all out there already. Like, I don't feel like I'm not saying there aren't anglers that think they're being secretive or are intending to be secretive, but the information is all out there at this point.
Do you think there's enough information out there, though, for just the average guy? Like, let's say it's a guy who fishes once a month, to feel like they could go do what you guys are doing with forward-facing. Because I feel like one thing I will say is it looks really easy on the screen, but if you actually go do it, I know, because I do it all the time, it's really hard. So it also almost feels discouraging, because if you take the average guy and you say, oh, I'm just going to go out here in the middle of the lake and, scope around, it feels really rough. Versus before, it's like, oh, there's some water willow. I can go throw a frog in water willow, and I feel like if I run enough of it, I'll get a bite. Because it's easier to comprehend. It's easier to kind of gain enough knowledge to be able to do it. Because you guys might feel like, oh, I get it. They're out in drains on bait balls. I know how to go use 2D sonar. But, like, a guy who fishes once a week, doesn't know all the fishing. I'm like, that's a lot harder ask to make him connect all those dots.
I mean, just the information's out there. You still have to take the information and apply it, and that's where your experience comes in. I mean, you can't just read a magazine and then think you're going to go, jack on them because you read the magazine. There's still an experience factor, regardless of technique. It's not. You still got to figure out how to go out and do it. But people are out there telling you exactly what you need to know right now. It's up to the angler to learn it, like read it, think about it, and apply it on the water to actually figure it out.
So there's a comment here. Johnny, why do you think the average guy should fish at the same level as the professionals? I don't think they fish at the same level, but what I'm trying to say is that if you're wanting to watch fishing to pick up some techniques to go to the lake and take and fish, from a viewership standpoint again, showing guys how to go catch them on a frog in shallow grass or flip docks is more approachable than being out in the middle of the lake, not showing the contour maps, not showing what's going on, and just being out there and casting. And if you give a guy forward-facing sonar, they're going to throw at a million carp and drum and see nothing and not know what's going on. And it's harder to connect that than to just guys who just fish a little more casually, not the most experienced. And this gets to my third point of my big rant from the beginning, is I feel like forward-facing sonar is excluding a lot of anglers from wanting to watch professional fishing in the way it is now, because you either have to have it to enjoy, watch, and learn, or you have to understand it at least enough to be able to watch, understand, and learn, and kind of get a feel for what's happening. If you don't have it, or you don't understand it, or you don't want to use it, it's tough to watch pro fishing right now and watch a lot of YouTube content, anything that has it, because, I mean, it's not applicable to what you're doing. And if tournament fishing continues to allow it, it's just going to become more and more and more prevalent. 74% of the top 10 finishes came on LiveScope this year. Once you get this next crop of college kids in, it's going to be 94% of top 10 finishes come with forward-facing sonar in 5 years. So at that point, then, you have to have the technology, or you have to want to use it to enjoy pro fishing, where before, that wasn't the case. You could always watch, a bunch of different guys run around shallow flip docks, do whatever, and you could be like, oh, I could maybe fish professionally. Not that you actually could, but like, I can throw a spinnerbait. I could go compete in the Classic Lake Christie. Now that illusion or that fantasy is kind of gone a little bit. Does that make any sense, or am I crazy?
I mean, it definitely makes some sense for sure. I mean, it kind of goes back to, what we were talking about with the percentage of viewership that actually cares. I mean, you kind of brought up golf. Like, what percentage of their viewers do you think are watching professional golf to be entertained or to learn something to try to become a professional golfer? Like, do you think that's happening? There's people that are watching the coverage of the golf tournament that are going to try to become a professional golfer? Or do you think they're actually out there doing it themselves, trying to get better?
Well, I think that goes back to my analogy perfectly. They watch golf because it's fun to watch dudes hit a 350-yard drive and then get out of the trees and watch Phil Mickelson hit a escape shot out of the branches. They're not there to watch Jordan Spieth putt on the green. Like, it's interesting when he's putting, but like, if it was just putting, they're not going to watch it. And that's the thing with forward-facing. Every tournament's a smallmouth tournament now. It's dudes with fairy wands in the middle of a lake going around not casting for 20 minutes because they're waiting to see the perfect fish. Like, is that really super interesting? And so if you want it to be a spectator sport, it's getting worse as a spectator sport, in my opinion, at least, because there's not as much visual stimulation.
We'll see on the Bass Pro Tour this year with our 2/3 of the season is going to be with no scope. So
I think it's great. I think that's going to be really good for a lot of things where you're going to see different scenery, different background, different techniques. Like from a YouTube standpoint, for me personally, I'll be able to say, hey, let me show you how Spencer went from catching fish in a drain to go and throwing a trap in shallow grass, and why, what the difference is with two techniques and how he's able to be successful in both. And you can give some variety in the content. Like, I think that's awesome. I think that's really cool versus just, 10 guys are out in the middle of a drain scoping.
You'll see a lot more diversity. You'll see a lot more different baits this year for sure. And I mean, that's simply because, our live scope isn't available, and those fish that we were fishing for we wouldn't be as efficient fishing for that same population of fish. So we're going to have to fish for a different group of fish or a different technique that we are going to be more efficient than those fish we were fishing for, which, it may be beating the bank with a chatterbait or crankbait or something. And you're going to see those efficiencies drop drastically. Like you brought up the 20 casts. If I could catch one every 20 casts in my non-live scope period, I would win every tournament and every Angler of the Year every single year, no doubt. But when you bring in live scope, your efficiency goes way up. So you're going to see the drastic differences, with 2/3 of our season this year And I'm excited to see how it plays out for sure. I enjoy fishing both ways. It adds a huge level of strategy. So hopefully it is the ticket to increase the viewership like we're talking about here. But again, I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is. It's going to be interesting to see. But I'm excited about it. You know, I just enjoy fishing and reeling them in. And honestly, more so than reeling them in, I enjoy figuring it out. Like that's what it's all about to me, is figuring out and, you know, where they're sitting, what they're feeding on, that type of stuff, rather than just the act of reeling them in. So I'm excited to have to expand the patterns that I have looked for. You know, like this year, it was pretty one-dimensional. Going into each tournament, I knew I could, you know, rig up 5 rods and I could probably find the fish to do well, cash a check, whatever. But, you know, heading into 2025, it is not that way at all.
For sure. And I think that's the main reason I've been getting so frustrated, Becker, about like the forward facing stuff, is because I'm in the content game just like Major League Fishing is. Like at the same time, yeah, I make my money basically the same way that Major League Fishing does at the end of the day. And I'm worried because I see my viewership tanking on forward-facing sonar videos. If I have forward-facing sonar in my videos, I get a third of the views that I do without them. And a lot of people might point to, okay, well, look at other YouTubers who have forward-facing sonar in their videos, like a Milliken Fishing. Well, Milliken Fishing, his videos are based more on drama and entertainment than on education of fishing. And I think that's the interesting part of it, is like, if a lot of the old fishing Bassmaster shows, there was some entertainment and there was also some education. There was the combo of both. And I feel like now with forward facing, there's less to educate on, so you have to become more entertaining, or you have to find ways to make it more educational in a way. And I think that's the balance to try to find. And that's kind of the other, like, the crux of the whole matter, is like, how entertaining can you make fishing? And the reason I'm bringing this all up too is because I want professional fishing to be, you know, strong. I love tournament fishing. I love the fishing industry. I don't want to see it start to fizzle out or get, you know, and that's why I'm so passionate about it, why I've been thinking about it so much, because I really want this to succeed. Even though I'm not a pro fisherman, I love the sport, if you want to call it a sport at this point, but, you know, that's what I love. But the other implications are on tackle. And I know, Stefan, you have some thoughts on the tackle side of it. What do you think about the tackle side of all of this deal?
Well, I mean, to sum up, I guess, everything you just said, you know, everything we've just talked about, you know, from a angler standpoint, you can't fault an angler for using forward-facing sonar when it's the most efficient tool that we have. So, you know, for all of us that are fishing tournaments, you're putting yourself behind the 8 ball if you aren't utilizing it. But like we kind of talked about in the beginning, there's really a handful of baits that we've unlocked to be the most efficient fish catching tools with forward facing sonar that we have. So I feel like we are in a situation where right now anglers are going to use forward facing sonar as long as it's allowed. And if that's the case, then you've only got a handful of baits, not just baits, rods, reels, you know, pretty much all your product that you're using. And the reality is that's really hurting sales across the board, to the point where I personally do think it's detrimental to the industry. You know, I've got
we hooked up live.
Everyone pause, watch.
We finally got on a stretch here that's got some fish. I knew it was any cast.
Oh, there we go.
On
a jerk bait. He didn't even have to use forward facing. Look at that. They don't need it.
Yeah.
Go buy jerk baits, not minnows.
It won't be the only one I'll catch down through here. Little guy, pound and a half.
Took him 55 casts. I was counting.
Yeah.
Are you really? Wow.
But
Well,
sorry,
it'll probably
Matt.
be about 55 more before I catch another one.
I have no.
That's
I
what
totally
you get when
forgot
you don't
what I
have
was saying.
live scope.
Yeah.
Huh?
I know.
I don't remember where you cut me off, Johnny. Right. in the
Sorry,
middle
you were
of it.
talking about it just has a negative impact on the market overall.
Yeah. The you know, now that I am more, well, maybe not more, but I am on the industry side as well with Core Tackle. you know, Johnny, you're the same way. We talk to a lot of other companies at this point. Like it's actually kind of amazing how many companies will reach out just to kind of chat, and how many times you meet people, whether it's at iCast or the Classic or someplace. And the overall consensus from the tackle side of things, or the not just tackle, but again, like rods and reels, is the sales are down dramatically. And pretty much everyone attributes it to forward facing sonar. And I think part of that goes back to what Matt Becker just mentioned a few minutes ago, you know, how he'd have 5 rods rigged and ready to go. And the reality is, I'd be willing to bet you those 5, if you're forward facing sonar, Matt, the 5 are probably going to be a jerk bait, a worm, a NACO rig, and then like 3 minnows in 3 different weights and sizes. Am I close?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, and that's pretty much every angler in a derby that's going to be pretty heavily weighted with forward facing sonar. And from that perspective, it's like, okay, well, that's not much in terms of tackle. Like, I mean, I remember the days where I'd have 20 rods rigged up with 20 different techniques, and then I'd have another 10 put away in the rod box for one-off instances. And I just feel like on the industry side, there's a lot of concern with respect to how long this can go on. Like, can you actually maintain a business by selling a jig head or a straight tail minnow? And
well, I think it even goes deeper than that. Is it, you know, if you were still fishing those same baits without forward-facing sonar, you would still be going through more tackle, because now you can keep your bait out of a brush pile and not get hung up and break it off. Or, you know, if you're throwing a crankbait, you can steer it and veer it away from a stump or whatever that you may get hung up on. So, I mean, you know, it even goes further than that. Just simplifying the baits you need. You're not losing as much tackle anymore because you can see where you're casting and you're not getting it hung up and breaking it off as much.
Yeah. So,
well,
you know,
you have, go ahead. So sorry, Matt, go ahead.
No, you go, Johnny. It's your show.
You don't need as many rods. You have all these different elements to it. You probably don't need as much line because you only buy braid and tie a little leader on it, and how many times you change the braid on your spinning rods. All these different things. It's not that it's going to have a long-term negative effect, because people will adapt and tackle companies will adapt, and there'll be people, if everyone starts using forward-facing, that's awesome. But what if everyone doesn't adopt forward-facing, and now there's this giant divide in the middle of the industry where there's people who kind of want to do it and kind of don't? There's not enough people, I feel like, in the fishing market to support a split market. That's one thing I'm a little bit worried about. Like, can a crankbait company really do all that well with 30% of the fishermen that want to fish a crankbait, and then there's the minnow companies that have 60% of the minnow market, or, you know, whatever? Is that enough to keep the industry strong? Because you're splitting up the money in a lot of different ways, instead of, you know, maybe companies could do a little bit of both and diversify into different things, and that's an option as well. But I just feel like there's a lot of issues that are splitting the audience.
You guys. Maybe you guys know, maybe you don't, but I'm curious if you have any idea on a core tackle side of things. Do you have any idea what percent of your customer base is a tournament angler versus just a fisherman?
I have no idea. Do you, Matt?
No, but I would. So the funny thing is, I would say that, and there's no factual information here, but I would be willing to bet you that the majority of customers for almost all companies are just fun fishermen.
Yeah, I would agree.
But having said that, I would bet you, so if it's like 80-20, right? 80% fun fishermen, 20% tournament fishermen, I'd be willing to bet you that 20% tournament fishermen spend more money, equal or more money than the 80%.
Yeah, I'd agree with
which
that.
I think is one of the weird things like about it. Like the tournament fishermen are the ones that are dropping weekly or monthly, multi-$100 orders to Tackle Warehouse, and the fun fisherman is more the one that's like going to the lake and they're buying a pack of worms to replace the one they used up.
Right.
Well, so
and the reality is, like with core tackle, like a lot of people connect us to forward-facing sonar, but I don't truly believe in any of the products we have were designed specifically around forward-facing sonar. We are fortunate that the products work well with forward-facing sonar and kind of dropped at the time when forward-facing sonar took off. But even more lucky for us was we didn't start 5 years before forward-facing sonar and have a whole lineup of other baits that don't work with forward-facing sonar. Like, that's where a lot of the companies are really struggling right now. They had a lot of product, whether it's crankbaits or top waters or baits that are not attributed to forward-facing sonar, and they put a lot of money into them. That's where a lot of their sales were. That's where a lot of their inventory is. And all of a sudden they can't sell it. And then they don't have product that's geared towards, hey, number two.
Oh, number two.
They're getting bigger.
Matt, Stefan had an over-under that he was going to catch over, what?
4.5. I said over 4.5
fish on stream, so we got to keep this stream going longer.
That was a fish release penalty there, too. You got to sit out for 2 minutes.
Yeah, I don't abide by that when I'm at home.
I don't know.
So, I mean, it's interesting to see. So basically, what I got out of that is you think that the tournament fishermen drive the majority of the tackle sales.
It's a stretch right here, though.
I think tournament fishermen drive a majority of tackle sales either themselves or through the promotion of their baits to either tournament fishermen or non-tournament fishermen. Yes. And the funny thing is, like, you don't ever really we don't know the numbers, right? We don't know the numbers of these other businesses.
Yeah.
And there's always ebbs and tides within business. So, the idea is that you're diversified enough to hopefully be able to weather something like this. And, maybe we see companies go under from it. Maybe we see new companies come out of it. And, that's kind of normal business. But there is the question of, if anglers aren't spending money anywhere within the industry, is that going to hurt the industry as a whole, where, all of a sudden our sponsor contracts are cut, or tournament payouts are down, or, your favorite rod company goes under. Like, I think there's going to be some of that. There's always going to be some of that. So some of it is normal. The question is, are we going to see like some sort of mass die off of industry companies?
Yeah. Do you think this phase is permanent? This is a conversation I had this weekend at the Big Rock show working with GSM. So basically, if all we're throwing right now is minnows and worms, in 5 years from now, the fish that were born this year, that year class of fish will be a healthy size, and those fish will have never seen a rattle trap or a crankbait. So will the rattle trap get hot again in 5 years? I mean, will it cycle back, do you think? Or you think this could be permanent?
I personally think that innovation needs to continue in tackle, because I think that the issue we're running into right now is that the jig head minnow is so dominant, and the jerkbait and the worm, that there's not been a need to go to other things. It's kind of like with the A-rig. The A-rig was so good when it came out. It got banned, but even if the A-rig was out, it lost its effectiveness to an extent. You can't just throw the A-rig. If the A-rig came back tomorrow, it's not like every tournament would be won with an A-rig now. So I think that that's part of it, is that there's not been a need for the innovation in the industry, and it's very much a copycat industry, as we know from Core Tackle, unfortunately. But coming out with new products and new innovation, I think, is critical, because if instead of making the industry a copycat industry, if it's let's have all these companies come up with new innovative ideas, maybe only 5% of them actually catch on, but there's probably a lot of techniques that we've never thought about that are going to be fantastic in the next 5 years. I mean, no one thought about the A-rig until the A-rig was here. No one thought about the chatterbait till the chatterbait was here. And so it's like, what's the next evolution of different baits? And I think that there's so much out there still to be done. So I don't think that there's necessarily this idea that people are only ever going to buy the minnows and stuff. But the fact that you go through fewer baits is because you can see your bait is a little bit tricky. The fact that you only need a couple rods right now is tricky. Maybe in the future they invent new baits that you need a bunch of rods for. So that's, that would be good. So I think long term it'll be fine from a tackle standpoint. I guess I'm worried about splitting up the pro fishing audience. That's still where I'm kind of stuck on.
Yeah.
It's like splitting up the guys who want forward facing and don't want forward facing. I don't think the fishing's big enough to split all those groups up, to be honest, across 3 different tournament organizations, across all this different stuff. Like, it's just a lot. Co-angler participation's down. Like, there's a lot of there's no good answer. No one has the right answer to it, but I wanted to just kind of put some of these thoughts I had in my head out to the world and get comments from you guys in the comments of this video and the stream. I did want to do one thing, though. Does anyone else have any comments on that? Because I have one more thing I want to ask you guys, a big question.
Well, I mean, my only question on that is what's the solution? What do you think we need to do?
Well, so here's the thing. This is why it's hard. I'm gonna come up with. I have 2 solutions in my head. One solution is make fishing more entertaining, like you brought up, Becker. Of how is golf fun to watch or fun to watch? Why does golf get more viewership to be able to get big corporate sponsors?
Yeah.
Over fishing, what is that? What's driving that, and how do we bring that into fishing and maintain it? If forward-facing sonar takes away some of the diversity, makes it one-dimensional, maybe we need to think about limiting it, like Major League Fishing did to an extent, because you can kind of change it up and have more diversity. I don't know if that's the right answer, but the other answer, to Spencer's point earlier, eliminating technology and going backwards maybe isn't the best idea either, because where do you stop? This is where one of the things I put in the thumbnail was, what is like a hard mode fishing? If you thought like a video game, what is hard mode for fishing? Easy mode or casual mode, obviously people would assume, is A-rig and forward-facing sonar. So let's just take that as easy mode or casual mode, even if we know it's not that easy and it's not that casual. But anyways, let's just assume that's what people think. But what is hard mode then? Is hard mode take away forward-facing and A-rig and that's it? Is it take away side scan? Is it take away down scan? Is it take away 2D? HD mapping? Does anyone go back to a paper map? GPS? Is GPS cheating? Is a boat cheating? Should we all be fishing from the bank and have to go around and crawl through the woods?
I think you should have to hand carve your own boat out of a tree.
Exactly. So what is hard mode fishing? Because if you ask an average person, they're like, you need to go catch him with nothing. Drop you in the woods and go find a creek and stab him with a stick. Like, I mean, the rules at that point are arbitrary, but there's probably if they do think the forward-facing sonar isn't the thing, you then have to come up with a rule set that makes sense. And you have to draw a line in the sand, just like golf did with driver technology, golf ball technology. You have to draw some line in the sand, but I have no idea where that line is. Because there was a lot of pros who had forward-facing, quote-unquote, like 360 imaging and dominated for a while. And that was, no one threw a stink about it, but it was a big deal. Side scan. There was a lot of pros that made a lot of money and made a career just because side scan came out and they learned that technology. So is that too far? Like, where is that line? And that's the part that I wanted to ask you guys about and ask in the chat. Like, what do you think hard mode fishing is from a tournament fishing standpoint, at least?
Man, that's the good question. Where do you draw the line? So I'll say for me, if you were to take one thing away from me that would harm me more than anything, it would not be forward-facing sonar. If you took away my mapping, it would harm me more than if you took away my forward-facing sonar. So you can
trolling motor.
Yeah, you're trolling. Like, where do you factor that into? But still, like, even that, I think I could fish without a trolling motor if I had the right mapping. Like, you could still get into areas and know where you need to be with mapping. Like, you can look at how a lake lays out and locate bass with the high quality mapping that we have. I mean, there's so many options, but you could give me all the live scope transducers I want. I would not catch as many bass as if I had mapping.
Well, that's the tricky part is, like, you almost have to test it all. And that's what I kind of want to do in my YouTube videos going forward is, like, do all these random challenges, 20 cast challenge. Is this ridiculous? Only fish with a paper map. Is this ridiculous? Do only HD mapping and 2D sonar. Like, where are the bounds of it? And the nice thing is I can test from viewership and what do people like? How do they react? Because that's the only way I think you really can solve this is you have to actually put some stuff out in the market, put 3 or 4 videos out in the market of each style and see what resonates with people the most. What do people find the most interesting? And I know that that's not the perfect way to do it, but that's at least what I'm going to try to do with my YouTube videos going forward is I want to try to find that sweet spot. I want to find what people think. Like, can I make forward-facing sonar content interesting? I don't know. Maybe my videos are going to suck. Maybe they won't. Can I make other styles of fishing interesting? And I think that's something that I am very interested in figuring out, because there's a format out there that I think can be compelling. Because enough people love fishing and love doing the sport and also love watching the sport that there's a format out there that's the most compelling. I just don't think we figured that part out.
See, the issue I have with all of this, Johnny, like, I don't disagree with anything that you said, but everything you said was about getting views, whether it's from a tournament standpoint, getting the views, or whether it's getting the views for creating content. To me, that's separate from what should be the sport of fishing, meaning the sport should be the sport. It shouldn't be about how do we create it, how do we make it entertaining. The sport's already entertaining. The problem is everyone's trying to draw more people into the sport so that they can make it a marketing vehicle. Like, if we started acting as a true professional sport and making decisions that are best for the sport, I think you would solidify it with the fan base. Now, it may not be the best thing to get eyeballs on the sport. If you're looking to get views, make crazy rules and make, crazy challenges that are going to be ultimately fun to watch as a viewer, right? But is that actually advancing the sport? Like, and that's where I think there's challenges with respect to forward-facing sonar. Like, forward-facing sonar, the question regarding it really, well, I mean, it's twofold. It's, as a tournament tool, you got to evaluate it from that standpoint, and then you got to evaluate it just for the average fun fisherman, right? Like, if you're talking about just using forward-facing sonar, then that really is going to fall back more on creel limits. If you're talking about using it in tournaments, then you got to look at it, does it affect the tournament? They're two completely different discussions. But ultimately, if you're viewing it from a tournament perspective, you need to evaluate whether it's a tool, and if it's too strong of a tool, then you don't allow it for the tournament. But if you're truly just trying to host a tournament to draw more eyeballs, then you start doing things that maybe aren't necessarily the right move for the sport. And do I think we'd have more fans and viewers potentially if we said, hey, Spencer's allowed to make 20 casts all day, Matt, you can't use a trolling motor? And, I think that would be great from a viewer perspective, but is it truly the best decision for the sport? I mean, that's the problem with all this. There's so many different things to balance that
you have to grow the sport too. That's the whole question. I know that we always talk about, and there's people who say grow the sport, and I know there's a bunch of people who've made this argument before, but like, there's only so much water, there's only so much stuff, so do you really want to grow the sport? And there's always this idea that you have to grow. This is a very much like American mindset of like the stock market always has to go up, and fishing always has to go up, and like there always has to be new technology and things like that. So I get your point on that too, and I haven't thought about it from that perspective, because it's like, yeah, I always think about how to get more views, but maybe it is, I want to fish a certain way, I'm going to choose to fish this way, and I'm going to stick to one thing that I like. Like, maybe pick a rule set, maybe that's the way to do it. These are the rules I like, I'm going to go do it my way. And I'm going to fish, and if you want to watch the content, awesome. If not, don't watch the content. And I guess that's kind of the process that some of the organizations are taking right now. Like, if you don't like forward-facing sonar, go watch somebody else. And maybe that is the right approach. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. That's interesting. It's I don't know if there is a right or wrong answer right now. We just got to kind of see how it plays out, I mean, obviously, the leagues, Major League Fishing, Bass Master, and PFL, they're all in the business of views. Like, that's how they're generating their income, their sponsorships, which in turn, boost the payout for the anglers. So, I mean, speaking for me personally, like, yeah, I obviously want Major League Fishing to succeed and, get the views that boost the sponsorships, maybe brings in non-endemic sponsors, which brings in more money, which in turn would boost the payouts and make it better for us. I don't know exactly what the right way to do that is. I don't know if, like I said, if we're hearing the loud minority, or if there's I just don't know the numbers, and I don't know if anybody does. People could say that they this many people watched the live stream, but do you actually know exactly how many people were there and how long they watched it, or if was it the same person that refreshed 10 times that got counted? Like, you don't really know the numbers, and I don't know how to I don't know what the answer is. I don't.
Well, and it's hard because like that's the part that with like I'm talking from a YouTube channel perspective, and so from like YouTube perspective, I can see all my analytics and my metrics on videos. When I have forward-facing sonar, I know my views are down. I also know from a poll of my audience earlier this year, 50% of my viewers have forward-facing sonar, 50% do not. And I can see when forward-facing sonar shows up in my videos that people click away. And there was a great comment thread out earlier where basically we were talking about, I think it was Mike in here in the comments. Yeah, Mike, he was saying that the reason he turns off my forward-facing videos is he doesn't have it. So why would he watch the videos? Because he can't learn anything from it. And so I did a series earlier this year where I did 4 videos where I took forward-facing off my boat. I actually, to be 100% honest, was just getting my boat switched around, so I had to take it off. And so I fished for a month without it on there. And those are the highest view videos on my channel by far, like 3 times higher views than even like my good normal videos. And so that resonated. But then I don't know if that's the right path either, because like Spencer's point, if pros are using forward facing, there's a demand to learn about that. There's a demand to learn about the different techniques. How is Becker catching them on a minnow or on this or that? Like, people still want to learn that too. So there's a part for that. And that gets to the point of splitting the audience, splitting everything up. If I just ignore forward facing, that might not be good for the people who want it. But if I use it, it's not good for the people who don't have it and can't learn from it. So you're stuck between a rock and a hard place no matter what you do, unfortunately, in this age. And I don't like the fact that it's that divisive, that that to me doesn't seem right, that is the way it is, because it is a fishing community, bass fishing community. It's never been this divided until now.
Yeah. The one thing I'll say with that, Johnny, though, like if I do a smallmouth video, I'll get half the views I do a normal one, and that's just because half the population doesn't have access to smallmouth.
Yep.
And they're just not as interested. So like I don't disagree with anything you said, but I go right back to, like Spencer made the comment in the beginning of this. He goes, in 5 years we won't have to worry about this because it'll be the norm. And assuming nothing does happen from a regulation standpoint, in 5 years, every boat that's purchased will come standard with it. And at that point, everyone, not everyone, but you'll continue to get a higher percentage of anglers out there that have it on their boat, because every year after that, every new stock of boats that's sold have it. And then when they sell the used boat, the person that buys it has it. And, I'd be willing to bet if nothing changes in 5 years, instead of 50% of your audience, I bet you it is like 80% of your audience. And, again, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I mean, I saw a news, the Minneapolis news station, I think it was at NBC there, did a video yesterday on their news, about forward-facing sonar and how the Minnesota DNR is evaluating the effects of it. And you get the right lobbyists going and anything can happen. So it wouldn't surprise me if in 5 years half the states have banned it. I think it's more likely that in 5 years it's just the norm, but I don't know where we're going with it.
Yeah, it's just, I feel like it's just as likely that it gets banned or turned around as it is that it's going to be here. Like, I guess personally, I don't even have a preference either way. Oh, hooked up. Oh man, Matt, we're getting close. You said 4 fish, so we're getting
I
close.
took the over 4.5. Put that in the boat, Spencer.
I need 5 to hit the over.
Oh, we're gonna count it no matter what. At least he's hooked up. He's catching, since he's catching these without forward facing, these count as double, so he's basically caught 6 fish so far.
They should, yeah.
I think he's got the over at this point because he caught him no forward facing.
Spencer, give us the breakdown. What are you using there?
Oh, just throwing a little jerk bait, throwing a jerk bait around. We got the wind
No,
blowing
give us
behind us, so it's hard to
specifics.
keep up
Come on.
with it.
Be a
What's
pro.
that?
What is that? A Mega Bass
juice. Give up
110
the
Tennessee
juice.
Shad. What do you got?
It's a Mega Bass 110 Junior. Gosh, I don't even know the name of it. I'll show you here in just a second. Making sure there wasn't another one out there with his napkin on.
Do you think there's a strong push to go to small jerk baits? I feel like
I
that's a
don't know.
big trend right now. The little jerk baits.
I mean, I think it's better post spawn. A small jerk bait for me seems to be better in post spawn than it is, or in the fall, when jerk bait bites first getting turned on. Like right now, I think you can catch them pretty good on a full size. Jamie's throwing a full size Mega Bass, and he's caught a couple since we've been on this call. So I think like pre-spawn though, depending on what kind of lake you're on, that's when you got a chance to catch them on like that Canada or something like that, But I'm just throwing it on a 12-pound fluorocarbon and a little Arkenboker cheer jerkbait rod. Nothing special.
Nice.
Just fishing without fly.
Yep.
I like it.
Yep. We hauling butt down this bank, and I'm just trying to keep up. That's it. Got lucky, and that was up there shallow.
That's awesome. Here's a question for all you guys, especially Spencer and Becker on this. So next year, you guys don't have forward-facing sonar for 2 periods. Let's say you're out there in the middle and you find a mega wad out there just kind of cruising, roaming on bait, and there's a decent number of fish in the area. Like, it's not like a deal where you have a couple random groups. Like, you're in a pretty good area. Maybe it's Toledo or something. Do you feel like it's a better strategy to just fan cast around out there with a minnow and a jerkbait or whatever, trying to catch those fish out there without forward-facing sonar? They're out there roaming. We're out there. You were catching them the period before and caught 7 fish or 10 fish or whatever. Is it better to do that, or is it better to go up to the bank and fish the bank, or like pull up on a point or a brush pile that you've marked with a waypoint, things like that? What are your thoughts on that? Have you thought that strategy through at all?
That's the $1 million question this year. I'll let you know after Conroe for sure.
Do you have a feeling one way or the other right now what you would do if you were in that situation?
I don't. I really don't. It's going to be pretty specific to the body of water, I feel like, and the time of year, especially. I really don't know. That's something that I'm really going to pay attention to and focus on in practice, and it's really going to be learning as we go. Like, it's, not using the live scope for 2/3 of the day. It's going to slow the catch rate down, slow the pace of the score tracker down. So you're not going to need to catch as many fish throughout the day to place the same as you have in the past few years. So, I mean, figuring out what that number needs to be, is there other patterns you can do? I don't know. Like you said, if there's an area where there's some fish floating out in the middle of a creek, say you could catch 10 of them in your live scope period. If you fish the whole next 2.5 hours without it, you think you could catch 1 of them, 2 of them? I don't know. I really have no idea. It's going to be very interesting to see. And I can't say which way I'm going to go yet. I have no idea. I've thought about it a bunch, and I go back and forth. One side of me is like, heck yeah, like if I just sit here and throw a little swim bait or a jerk bait around these fish, like eventually I'm going to dumb luck and put it in front of one. I know they're in the area. So, part of me is saying that. And the other part of me is like, just go throw it obvious stuff down the bank, throw it at docks or, crank riprap, high percentage stuff. And you're going to get a couple bites doing that, versus, hoping to catch a couple out in the middle. I really don't have an answer for it, but that'll be something that we could talk about later, halfway through the season, and see if there's a clear-cut strategy for that. But at this point, I have no idea how the year's going to play out. Spencer,
you have any thoughts on that one?
I mean, for me, it's all going to depend where the fish are positioned in the water column. If they're on bottom, the period I can use scope, if I'm seeing them really attached to the bottom or brush or rock, then yeah, I'll definitely keep fishing for them fish without scope. But if they're positioned really high in the water column and there's a pretty healthy population of them swimming around, then I feel like I can catch them on a jerk bait, maybe a swim bait of some sort. But if those fish, like at Toledo Bend last year, you know, they're out over 40 foot of water, 15, 20 foot down, man, it's almost impossible to catch those fish without scope. So you're basically just wasting your time. At Toledo Bend this past year, I would have probably ran guts and pockets and drains and thrown a jerkbait, because you could catch a lot of fish doing that, not a lot of scorables. There was also a couple creeks that were full of hydrilla. You know, I'd probably went and thrown a jerkbait around the outsides of some hydrilla. So this year is what's going to be really key is really paying attention to live, the period you can use it, and during practice, and just making a substantial amount of waypoints on very isolated pieces of cover or the very tips of grass. I mean, things that you know you can set up on without scope and make the right cast to get a bite.
And that's my favorite way of fishing. That's how when I'm not using forward facing, that's my style. Like just graphing, dropping a bunch of points on a bunch of random small isolated stuff. That's how I love to fish. Anyway, so it's like that's the part of fishing that's the most exciting for me is doing that. Even if it's just a 2D, it doesn't matter. But that was as exciting to me. And so I don't know. I'm pumped to see you guys do it. The question though is, Stefan, are you going to sell out to scope? Because now you're going to be in the opens. And that's all you got. You got active target 2, you got minnows, but you also have a whole tackle wall behind you of stuff that's not minnows and active target 2. So what are you going to do, Mr. Tackle Man?
I mean, I think the biggest mistake I've made the last couple of years is trying to do both. I think heading into each tournament, I'll pick one direction. So like the first open I'm fishing is on Sam Rayburn. I'm probably going to dangle a minnow for an entire practice, an entire tournament, and you know we'll see. Each event will be different, but I don't personally think it's a good thing to go into a tournament and be like, I'm gonna spend one day trying to catch them with scope, one day trying to catch them somewhere else, which is, I just think there's a lot of clutteredness to that. And I honestly, I mean, you know, I would like to be fishing with Matt and Spencer again this year, but I'm not really a big fan of the 1 period with and 2 periods without. And I mean, the invitational guys are going to have to do the same thing because they've got, I think it's one full day out, 1 full day with it or something like that. And I mean, it'll be interesting. I mean, I don't like it as an angler, and I don't like it as an angler from a fishing perspective and a strategy perspective, and I don't really like it as an angler because I think there's going to be a lot of anglers that get quite a bit of criticism based on statistical analysis of their performance with or without it. And some of that might be fair, and I think some of it might not be. You know, if an angler's doing well and he runs up the scoreboard with it, he's probably going to go practice the next period with or without it. And I just think there's going to be a lot of scrutiny on anglers that is not necessarily just.
That's one thing I've already determined is
I know you love that, Johnny. You are so ready for the stats. I know that.
I am not doing those stats because the thing I will say, to be fair to guys, if it's allowed, the guy could spend their entire practice just finding forward-facing sonar fish, and their entire tournament trying to focus on finding out their whole strategy could be how to catch as many fish in that period as possible, and then just survive the other periods. That's a completely valid strategy, and that doesn't mean that they can't catch him the other way potentially, even if it's a guy who can catch him both ways. They just may have never even looked at the bank, and then they have to go practice during the day or just whatever. Or if, like to your point, they go look for more forward-facing sonar fish. They just don't even bother if they caught enough. So I don't think that's a fair. I mean, you could take pros that could do both for years. Like, let's say you take I'm trying to think of who's, like, you could take a Jacob Wheeler and say he caught all of his fish during his forward-facing sonar period. But if he wins every tournament, it's not like Jacob Wheeler can't catch him up shallow. It's just he prioritized that as a strategy. So I don't think that's if those arguments come up, I will definitely defend the pros on that, because you can't. That's unfair to do when it's allowed. Just to say that they couldn't. Like, they didn't catch him in those periods even though they weren't fishing potentially. I don't know. Does that make sense? No, if they were fishing and they couldn't catch him, that's a different thing. And they were trying to catch them that way and they didn't. That's a different story. But So to summarize all of this, we have no conclusions. We don't know what's best. There's a lot of there's a lot of opinions. We don't know if it's good or bad or what it is long term. I don't think that I've ever felt like the sport has been in this, and I know there's like social media and all this stuff that's blowing so out of proportion, but I don't remember the sport being this divided and everyone being this confused about the fishing industry and the fishing market as it is right now. And I've been in the industry since I was 8 years old. So I've been going to the Bassmaster Classic for 22 years. So I feel like I have a pretty good sense of like the scuttlebutt that's around. And I don't know if it's, again, just a factor of the times, if, you know, a couple of YouTube videos about hating forward-facing sonar sparked a revolution. I don't really know what happened there, but it is going to be interesting to see. The one thing I do know is fishing's supposed to be fun, and I think I'm going to try a bunch of different stuff for video content this year, but I think I'm also going to focus on at least a few videos and a few trips each month doing what I want to do. And what I want to do is take forward-facing off the boat, go side scan around, even though side scan might be too far for some people, mark a bunch of stuff, and try to catch schools of fish. That's what I love to do. And that's what I'm going to keep doing on my YouTube channel for sure, because that's my favorite way to fish. And I love driving and graphing for 5 of my 8-hour day, driving the boat. People think I'm crazy, but that's what I love doing. So I'm going to keep doing that. I don't know what everyone else is going to do, but...
I think you nailed it there. I mean, you said fishing is supposed to be fun, so like every angler needs to figure out what they enjoy doing and just go out and enjoy fishing. Now, like, kind of bring up the tournament side of things and viewership. That's where, we need to figure out what makes it entertaining or engaging or educational or whatever it may be to continue to grow the viewership on that side of things. But as far as actually the act of fishing, I mean, I've been a huge proponent of this since LiveScope came out. If you don't like it, that's fine. Go fish however you want to fish. Like what I do in a professional level tournament should not affect you going out fun fishing on the weekend and how you fish. Like if you want to try and do that, that's awesome. Go for it. But if you don't want to do that, there's nothing wrong with that. There's still plenty of fish to be caught. You can go enjoy a fun day out on the lake and catch a bunch of fish and enjoy fishing. Like that's what it's all about. Having fun, catching a few fish and enjoying time out on the lake. So that's something I've always preached is just do what you like to do, like do what we'll figure out the viewership, we'll figure out what people want to watch or, how to explain that or learn that or whatever it may be. But, on a personal level, just do what you like and get out there and catch some fish.
Sure. I do want to respond to one comment real quick because I knew this was going to be a problem. And this is like, I knew that people were going to take this the wrong way, and I shouldn't have even gone down the path. But anyways, to respond to, it was Random Kitchens podcast. So the comment was, do you feel the same way about the younger guys? I just mentioned I wouldn't pull up the stats.
Go ahead.
What?
That's Matt. That's Brittany.
Brittany, okay. So yeah. Brittany, this is what, hear me out. So the young guys, what I'm trying to say with all of this is that if you restrict the sport to only having to be good at a few techniques, right now 72% of the top finishes are from forward facing, 60+% are just with a minnow, a jerkbait, and a wacky rig worm. You can win a lot of money and be competitive with 3 techniques. If you only had to spend 5 years learning 3 techniques and you can be competitive at that level, that means that it's great for your career. You can do that. And I'm not saying it takes less skill or they didn't go that path. But in the past in fishing, you couldn't take 3 techniques like that, or really 1 technique with a few baits, and win as much money as you're winning in the sport of bass fishing right now, because you had to be more multifaceted. You may be able to win 1 tournament, but like the scope and the breadth of tournaments that have been won. So I'm not saying that these guys are not good at fishing, or that they've been able to take advantage of the current archetype or the current, like, I guess, like the trend. Meta for fishing.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to get at, is it's not that these guys, I'm not trying to talk bad about them. What I'm saying is that they can focus on one thing and be very, very good at it and be competitive. And that's never happened before in professional fishing. Now, I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying that's the way it is. So I guess I wasn't trying to like talk negative about anyone. I'm just trying to be very clear that it's a completely unprecedented situation in the history of fishing. Does that make sense to you guys? I hope that I explained that well.
Yeah, I think just to summarize, I don't think it's a matter of age. I think what you're saying is guys can focus on one thing, not necessarily get the experience all over the place, and compete in pretty much every tournament. Like there have always been specialists in the sport, right? There's always been guys that were just they're gonna flip a jig in every tournament. And there were always guys that were just gonna crank a crankbait. Generally speaking, they had some good tournaments and they had some really bad tournaments because that technique wasn't necessarily dominant in every tournament for the season. I think, nowadays you can concentrate on the forward facing sonar and be much more consistent in every tournament because there's a way to make it work versus you can't flip a jig in every tournament. I mean, you can try it, but you're probably going to have the chance of having some bad tournaments. But I mean, from an age perspective, I truly believe right now with all the information out there, the high school and college fishing, those guys are ready. When they're 22 when they graduate college now, those guys are fully capable at competing at the top level versus when most of the guys who are say 40 and older, they didn't even start tournament fishing until they graduated college. And then at that point, there wasn't even the knowledge out there to be gained like there is now. So, like, again, I'll utilize myself in this case. I graduated, I fished 25 local tournaments a year. And then by the time when I hit 30, I felt like I was in a position to take a stab at a national level type thing. Those 8 years from college to 30 is the same 8 years these kids in 4 years in high school, 4 years in college, and they're ready to go because they're actually fishing tournaments all over the country, getting a lot of experience, and they're learning at a much faster pace than I was able to at that point.
And all the information's out there. I mean, we have both of you guys to blame, I guess myself included now with the YouTube channels, is all that high level information and juice is out there. Yeah. And you want to bring up the younger generation. Well, they're programmed to learn off of a screen now, so they're learning all of that information and at a much younger age. That there is probably 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds watching our YouTube channels that are learning about fishing, and they continue to gain that knowledge as they grow up, and they have all of that knowledge that, and 20 years ago, it would take you 10, 20 years ago or 10, 20 years to gain that much knowledge. And now all of these kids have learned that by the time they're graduating high school, if they're serious about it.
Here's one more question though. So this is another question. Sorry. Is it possible though, like with forward facing, I know I can take forward facing now, and you guys know this too, to pretty much every lake in the country and use it to catch fish. Now you have to understand seasonal fish behavior and the positioning and all that stuff, but it does make it easier to gain that information quickly. So if you even had information with all the YouTube videos and everything available, if we went back to 2000, you have all the information you have available now, but you go back to 2017, pre-LiveScope. I don't know if you'd be able to see kids or anyone, say it's not a kid, it's someone who's just a weekend angler to go to pro just by watching a bunch of YouTube videos, by learning the patterns across the entire country, because you have to learn so many techniques pre-forward facing to kind of be good all around the country. Pro fishing is different from being good in a local tournament. So you have to go to Florida, Tennessee River, Texas, up north. But now you can go to Toledo Bend and you can fish the exact same way to a pretty decent extent as you would in a lot of lakes around the country, and you can translate those skills a lot easier because of forward facing. That's kind of where I'm getting at with it. I think that the learning curve has dropped a lot if you have that technology, where the learning curve, you have to do a lot more trial and error to know, are there fish here, what's good, what's bad, when you can't actually see them on the screen. I think that is, again, nothing is good or bad. I'm not saying this is a bad thing. I think it's fine that that's the way it is. It's, again, all of it is just different. And that's the part that's hard for me to wrap my head around, is it's just, I have no idea if it's good or bad. I don't see as bad. It's just different. I think the people don't like different. I think that's why you get a lot of people not liking it, is because it's just different.
I mean, there's no doubt that the technology has made it easier to break down a fishery and find fish, but it kind of goes back to what I started with, is the average fan does not see the behind the scenes effort that a lot of the younger guys are putting in right now. And when I'm saying effort, it is a lot of time, money, time on the water. They're pre-fishing these fisheries where the tournament is at for, maybe a week, maybe some cases a couple weeks or a month. Some of these guys that, they're young, they don't have a family, a home. They're literally living out of their truck and boat on the road, and they will go break down this fishery and learn every little piece of knowledge about it before the off limits period. That way, once the actual tournament starts, they have a pretty good understanding of this fishery. So,
were they not doing that before though, Matt? Like when you were on tour, Seven, were there not 20-year-olds? Like when you first started on tour, were there not 20-year-olds who also did that same thing, or do they think they're taking it more seriously now than they did? Look at that one. That's a good one. Or it's just close to the camera. I can't tell.
It was definitely.
This is the hand moment. Let's knock on wood for Spencer.
There have always been pros traveling and pre-practicing prior to events. I don't recall there being the same number. Like there were a handful of guys. Like I think about like Shin Fukai. I mean, he would go from lake to lake to lake to lake. There definitely was a lot of pre-practicing going on. I think some of these younger kids coming out of college are literally, they're vagabonds. They're doing what Shin Fukai did. I mean, if you made me pick one, I'd say there's actually more college kids doing that now than there was 15 years ago when I started.
Yeah.
But I mean, there was a lot of pre-practice still going on back in those days. I mean, the best anglers, the anglers that have always been, really performing at the highest levels, in my opinion, have been putting their time in on the lakes that are on that tournament schedule.
Well, I mean, that's kind of my point with all of it, is like take away the sonar, is still goes back to the angler spending the most time on the water, the ones doing the best.
Yeah.
That's always been the case.
Yeah.
Here's a question, or here's a idea from Eric. He did a super chat. Thanks, Eric. Appreciate that. What about limited culls and tournaments? You have to be tactful about how fish are culled and force anglers to use bigger baits. So basically, once you get 5 fish, you can't cull anymore. Like 5, once you put the 5th fish in the live well, it's done. Yeah. There was tournaments that did that before, right? Wasn't that Ultimate Match Fishing? Once you put 5 in the boat, you had to sit down.
There's been walleye tournaments have done that for a long time.
Yeah, and I think redfish too. I've watched that where there's no culling. Once you box a fish, it's there. That would definitely add strategy into it. I mean, it would.
I don't like it.
I agree. For me, fishing's about catching the fish, and I want to catch as many as I can, and bring in the 5 biggest, or put as many as I can on the score tracker, whatever the format may be. Like for me, it's about the act of catching the fish. I don't want to have to be selective on which fish I catch. I think that's giving us too much credit on how easy that may be, because that would not be very simple to, try to say I'm only going to catch 5-pounders. You're going to catch some 3-pounders mixed in. So, once you catch one, oh man, we're
gone. Oh no, he might get back in.
I thought I was going to hit the over.
He needed one more. We can always say he got it off camera. Okay, one more idea, Matt. Oh, go ahead.
Hold on, just to add to that, I understand the idea and the thought behind that. I think there's a little bit of conservation aspect to that. I truly believe that the future is much more along the lines of catch, weigh, release. Whether that is total weight in the terms of like the BPT, or whether that's the Elite Series going to a 5-fish format where they can catch, weigh, release, let go on the spot. You know, if you're going to use catch, weigh, release, it doesn't matter if you catch, you know, 1 fish or 400 fish. That's probably the best thing for the fish. Like, and from that standpoint, like, I think that's going one step above and beyond the idea of, hey, no cull after you have your 5 fish, because that, like Matt said, the aspect or the idea of us having control on the size of the fish, there's a, I don't know, I hate the word luck in fishing, but there's a little bit of luck. I mean, you got a school of 20 fish breaking on the surface and you catch the 2-pounder when the rest are 4-pounders. Like,
even if you're using the live scope and, you know, you're looking at a fish, say it's a 20-inch fish, you can't control if that fish is skinny or fat. That could be a pound difference in the weight or more, you know? So like you can't see those things with the sonar. Now, I mean, it would add a level of strategy if once you caught that fish, you had to decide if you kept it or not. You know, that would definitely add another level of strategy. But I mean, it could be entertaining for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. And just to hold on to touch real quick on that, Johnny, I feel like I'm getting blasted. I pulled up the comments. I wish I wouldn't have done this.
No,
I'm getting blasted.
It's a cesspool in the comments right now.
Saying that it's a Wisconsin rule. It was a Wisconsin rule. It has been changed now because it was a dumb rule and you're allowed to cull now.
That's the only reason I moved to Arkansas was to avoid that rule, and now they changed it, so I might need to move back, you know?
Well, that was a Minnesota rule, wasn't it? That's what you seen on like the Mississippi River when.
Yeah, I mean Minnesota had it too at times. Yeah, no, but yeah, Wisconsin is I don't know. I don't even know what. I don't think it's a rule in Minnesota either. I don't quote me on that. I haven't fished in Minnesota a tournament in a while, but
no, they've gotten rid of that because all of the the tournaments on the
Leech Lake, the Open, and all that was up there. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe they get a permit for it. I don't know. They may get a permit for that.
I have another idea. Let's say that Major League Fishing wanted to go back to forward-facing sonar in 2026. I have a way to make it interesting for the viewers and the sponsors. Hear me out. You can take this to the board, Matt, if you want. Okay. Becker, not you, Stephen. You're not allowed in the room anymore.
Wait, what?
So this is the idea for Major League Fishing, free of charge. Okay.
Oh yeah. No, they won't let me. I can't go to that.
You have 8 hours in the day. They have a giant wheel, and they get professional, like famous people to spin the wheel, and it lands on a certain bait, and you can only use that category of bait. And you put all the sponsors of all the pros into a big pot, and you say, these are the baits. When it lands on crankbait, these are the applicable crankbaits, or deep diving crankbait. And it's only in the sponsored product pool. But the sponsors have to sponsor the anglers to get their baits in the eligible list. So, like, it would incentivize sponsors to actually want to go sponsor the anglers. It's not Major League Fishing. It has to be angler sponsors. So, let's say that there's some random crankbait company that doesn't have a tour pro under their thing. They have to go find one so they can be on the list of allowed lures. And so then you can spin it, and then every hour they change the lure. And then you get to figure out what are the guys throwing, why are they doing it different. Oh, look, Thrift is throwing this jig, and Becker's throwing this jig, and Shuffield's throwing this jig, and one guy's throwing a white little jig, and the other guy's throwing a big mop jig. Like, why are they doing that? Great commentary. It's just baits. Baits are easy to talk about. People love baits. And you don't have to worry about the forward-facing component because you can just talk about the baits and not talk about the forward-facing part, and they're still catching the fish, and you get to see a million baits on
I think
display.
I disagree with you, as you wouldn't see a whole lot of fish getting caught.
If it was forward-facing allowed, though?
Yeah. I mean...
Yeah.
You let me have live scope, but make me catch on a deep diving crankbait.
I caught like 25% of my fish on forward-facing sonar and a deep diving crankbait last year. So I don't know what you're talking about. That was my number one bait.
In the summer, yes. But
here's the thing.
On the lake right now with a deep diving crankbait, I'm not going to catch many.
But that's the exciting part, is whoever starts figuring it out, there's 40 guys on the thing. If they could get to cut to people's cameras and stuff and doing everything, I don't know. I think it's a cool format because people love baits.
That would
It's
be a
great.
cool specialty event.
Yeah, it's great made for TV. You do that like in the team series, that would have been a blast.
Yeah.
But that's made for TV stuff. If you want to see who's the best at catching fish, let them do their thing. Don't make them throw a frog when it's not going to happen.
I agree. If it's about who's the best at figuring out the fish that week, there needs to be less restrictions, not more.
Yeah. I it's funny, Johnny. I think I could argue pretty well that one of the issues right now with fishing live streams, like tournament live streams, is there's too many fish getting caught. I think a lot of viewers relate to anglers when they're struggling and not catching the fish, and they want to see the process that those anglers go through to try to be successful. And right now, like, we've added more cameras to a lot of boats, or we transfer cameras from somebody who is struggling to somebody who's catching them. And then the viewer chimes in and they see, oh, look, we went to Matt. Matt catches one. And then they cut from Matt before he can even talk about what he was doing to Spencer, who just caught one. And then they go from Spencer to, Wheeler, who caught one. And, the fan who just sat there and watched the show just saw 40 fish get caught. And they're like, this looks too easy. And the reality is half the field is out there going, I don't know how these guys are catching them. And like, that's the thing where I feel like you almost need some of that negative fishing aspect to actually make good TV.
The process of figuring it out, like the practice period or the, going through the motions. But I don't know how that can be portrayed into a live stream or a TV show or whatever. And then, like, for me personally, like, I don't think I want to give that up. Like, I think I could make more of a living keeping that information to myself, based on tournament results than the entertainment value of it.
Okay, so let's say for a devil's advocate of this, let's say that we did this stupid bait wheel idea. I'm not saying it's a good idea. I'm just throwing stuff out there. Let's just say we did this idea, but viewership for fishing in 5 years doubled. That means your sponsorship dollars you're making right now double. Let's just say that that's the case. They doubled. And so the tournament winnings maybe are going to go up as well from that. But maybe they like move it down. I don't know how they would do the winnings and all that stuff. But like, so everything's going to double if you do that format. So you're going to make more money. You're going to potential to make more money, but you're making more guaranteed money from sponsors. But you have to give up the essence of the sport. I'm going to go, like do a strict tournament fishing, or I want less restrictions. But if they implemented this Wheel of Fortune for fishing, you double views, double sponsorship, double payouts. Would you want to do that, or would you still want to stick to the I guess essence of professional fishing as it's been for years?
I want to do it as a specialty event.
Like, I'm just saying, overall, fishing has to go to something like this. Stuff. Like, overall, fishing has to change fundamentally from a tournament standpoint, but you can double views. And then all tournaments are like that. This is a crazy idea. I'm not saying this is realistic, but would you be okay?
I think an organization needs to say that's what we're doing then. Like, I don't think there'd be anything wrong with an organization that says, listen, we want to become made for TV. We want to make this fun. We want to make it a little goofy. The thing is, you got to choose that side and you got to go with it then. Like, if you wanted to make fishing, like, what was that show, Wipeout? Was it Wipeout on TV, where like people are running across an obstacle course and like big boxing gloves are like knocking them? Like, if you want to do that, go. Like, I think that's all for it. As a competitor, I would love to go head to head versus Becker, spin a wheel, and say you get 1 hour to fish whatever the bait is. Like, as a competitor, I think we would have a blast doing that. But if you're truly trying to be a sport, you're not going to get anywhere with that. Like, I'm not saying you won't get views doing what you want to do, but I don't think it's necessarily a good thing for the sport.
Yeah, I feel like that has to be separate from one of the major tournament leagues. Like that sounds like a great idea for a YouTube channel. So That
great
kind of
for
reminds
you.
me. I had got a recent comment. Someone suggested that we need to take our mailbox more to the water. So maybe that's the first step.
Well, I got a package coming real soon.
I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy because like I get that there's all this negativity around tournament fishing. I think that we're getting to this point though where it's like, okay, there needs to be some set rule set or something that's like set, and then we just stick with it and we let people enjoy, or maybe some people leave and we have to go through a dry patch maybe, but eventually it gets there. I think that's kind of the solution long term. Maybe that's what we concluded, but I do think that is probably the best solution if we don't want to change the nature of pro fishing, is pick a rule set, stop trying to mess with it too much, and just stick with it. Because that's what they do with golf. Golf has a specific rule. Like all the tournaments, they all have these limitations on drivers and golf balls and everything. Everything is like golf tournaments, the rules are the rules. But that's not how it is for fishing. There's 3 organizations and there's YouTubers doing whatever they're doing, and it's like no one knows exactly what the rules of fishing are. There's no rules of fishing technically, like tournament fishing. It's whatever you want to do. And I think that does cause some confusion, especially when you introduce sonar technology that is so divisive and now is allowed or not allowed, because it's like, what am I supposed to do? And I think there's a lot of comments that have been interesting too from guys saying like you can still win local tournaments without forward facing sonar at this point. And that's also true. You can do well without forward facing. You're going to do a lot better with it on average. If you want to win a lot of money, you can, go all in on it and you're going to do a lot better. And I think that's also the hard part for me, is like, I know that that's the best way to catch them. So it's hard for me to go throw a frog down the bank when I know I can go scope them. You know what I mean? Even though I have more fun throwing a frog. So this was really therapeutic for me though, guys. Thank you for letting me get all this off my chest.
Glad we could help. You'll get a bill for the therapy session.
Yeah. No kidding.
Did you guys?
I'm glad you feel better, Johnny.
You guys probably don't feel better, do you?
Well, I don't. It's honestly, I don't know that it definitely was not therapeutic. If anything, I think this is like everyday life for Matt and I right now, where it does like it. This is our business, right? Yeah. So like we have these discussions every day, and it is definitely frustrating as an angler to be going through this time, because as you stated, it is, in my opinion, the most divisive period I've ever seen within fishing, when the reality is we all freaking love this sport. And it used to be like, you go to the grocery store and randomly run into somebody who liked to fish. And this, it doesn't matter where you are. It's like you could strike up a conversation with that person and you'd have a great time doing it. Now all of a sudden it's like, I'll do a video or mention the word active target, and I got people that don't want to talk to me because I'm the devil now because I use it. And it's like, what happened to bass fishing? And that's the frustrating part. And I think Matt and I are going through it a little bit more at a professional level, where it does affect our business in some form or fashion. And honestly, we're not really doing anything as individuals to deserve that, in my opinion. Like, it's going down in the sport, but Matt gets scrutinized because he's caught on TV using a forward-facing sonar unit, where the reality is, as a competitor, it would be completely detrimental to our business if we said, you know what, I'm not going to use it. Whether you agree or disagree with it, if you said, I'm not going to use it, because you're going to give your competition such an advantage that it, like, listen, I want to keep fishing for as long as I can as a career. I'm not going to give Becker as much advantage as that over me, because he's going to crush me every time. He already crushes me most of the time. And from that standpoint, it's like, competitor wise, we don't want to give that up. So like, we're using it, whether you agree or disagree with it, because we have to from a business standpoint. And it's just, the sport is at a very, very divisive time. It feels like it's stressful, because now I feel like when you start talking about fishing, bass fishing mostly, it feels like you're talking politics. And when I grew up, my parents always told me the things you don't talk about, with people you're not familiar with, is what? Money, religion, and politics. And now I feel almost like you could add bass fishing to that. And that is not how it should be at all. Like, it really should not be, but it is right now.
It's tough too that you're feeling that way, Matt. Like all of this, well, both Becker and Stefan, because it's like I know deep down you probably would prefer if they took forward-facing sonar away, and you're like, hey, I'm not going to fish with forward-facing sonar. You basically almost won Angler of the Year on the Tackle World's Pro Circuit without it.
Yeah, my stance, just so everyone's clear, as a tournament tool, I think it is too strong. I think, like, at a professional level, when you give it to the guys that are already killers, it makes them just that much more deadly. I think it's potentially harming the industry as a whole. As a fun fisherman, I love it as a tool. And if somebody wants to go out and catch more fish using it, or somebody wants to go out and catch their limit of crappies with it in 2 hours versus 4 hours, more power to them. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. As long as they're following state regulations, I think they should have that right. Like, I'm not a fan of the idea of like the states regulating what I can and cannot fish with. I think I think their goal is to make sure the fisheries are at a sustainable population, right? So if there truly is harm to the populations, we should discuss that. That should be addressed. But if you're talking about, as a tool, I'm not against forward-facing sonar. I'm not a fan of it at the highest level of tournament fishing because I think it changes the game too much. It's, similar to what you were saying about golf or, in baseball. They don't use aluminum bats because they get too good. Like, I don't think it's a good thing if you get too good at the sport. I think you got to make it a little bit more difficult for the competitors. And I think that's where we're at with fishing right now. I think all of a sudden we have a tool that makes the game less interesting because people got too good at it.
I think you pissed Becker off by stating.
I know, he just left.
He left. I mean, I agree. The thing I find, Matt, is like I had a lot of fun with forward-facing sonar for the first 2.5 years I had it. Now, when I use it, I'm like sad. I actually feel sad on the lake using it because it's like I know exactly how I'm going to catch them. Like I went out to the local lake the other day. We're testing out a new jig head and a new minnow that we have with core tackle. And I went out there, and within 15 minutes, I found some bait balls, dropped a forward-facing sonar, and caught a 5-pounder. And it's like, okay, it's cool that I can do that, and I know how to do that. And it's like, okay, it happened, but I've done that now enough times where I'm like, it's frustrating that that's the best strategy, and that's the way I know I can always go catch him. Because when I would go to that same lake before, I'm like, am I going to catch him throwing a jerkbait on brush piles, fishing an old road bed? Am I going to have to go find a little isolated patch of grass? Am I going to have to do X, Y, or Z? And there was like 7 or 8 things I was thinking when I went to the lake that I could do that's like, these all could be the best thing. I don't know what the best thing is, but now I know what the best thing is. When I go to the lake, I know the best thing is going to be shaking a minnow or throwing a Nico rig or throwing a jerkbait with forward facing, and that's all I need to do. And I don't like that from a personal standpoint because it feels it's artificially limiting because my goal is always to catch the biggest 5 fish because that's my mindset as a tournament guy. So maybe this is my personal problem with it as well.
Nobody's forcing you to use it, Johnny.
I know,
like
no one is. And that's why I fished without it 75% of the time since July. 75% of my trips are without it. But I keep putting it back on because I'm like, oh, I want to test this or do this or someone told me this. And I catch them and I'm like, that's cool. But then I get bored with it right away and I take it off again. And then I'm like, it's like, oh, someone told me about this technique and this new little like nuance of the head or whatever. And I'm like, I got to try it. And I do it. I've literally taken my forward-facing sonar off my trolling motor 4 times in the last 6 months. Like off and on and off. I've been so frustrated with it. It's crazy. I don't know. Maybe I'm just weird. I don't know. I feel like more people are feeling this way too. I can't be the only one.
No, I mean, I definitely have noticed that I get bored with it for sure. It's repetitive. You're doing the same thing. But as a tournament angler, I need to perform on the clock in a tournament. So that's what I got to do. there's that line where you got to do what you got to do to be successful at the highest level, and then there's another side where it's you got to do what you enjoy and what you like, going out and having fun. So I'm with you. I mean, there's definitely times where I go to the lake and I look for other ways to catch them just because I enjoy doing that. I don't care that there's somebody on the same lake that day that's probably out there scoping that's going to catch more than me. Like, I want to go catch them on a jig under boat docks, and that's what I'm going to go do and get some bites, have some fun doing it. And I don't care if I don't catch them as good as somebody else that day. It's just what I wanted to do.
But in the back of your mind, aren't you thinking, I know that I heard this dude caught 25 pounds. Could I have gone and done that? I just got to make sure in my head I know I could have done that. Because, like, as a tournament guy, you're like, I want to make sure that someone doesn't have the edge on me. And I don't have that because I'm not a tournament guy. But I still feel that, like, competitiveness with nobody, which is so weird. It's a weird, like, thought. Because it's like, I got to make sure I know I can still go do that. Part of me feels that way.
For me, like, I approach days on the water a little different than that. Like, I have my obviously my tournament weeks where it's practice for a tournament. I have like my pre-practice times where I go out on the water just breaking down a new fishery. And then I have like my fun fishing days where those days when I go out, I don't care what anybody else is doing. I don't care, what the hot bite is or what, like I'm going out to have fun and do what I want to do. Like, I don't give a crap what anybody else is doing. And really, I don't care what anyone else is doing every day I go out on the water, but definitely those days where I'm going out to do what I want to do and have fun. It's like those days are for me. The fun fishing days, you're going out with a goal in mind of just having fun and reeling some in. And, that I'm just sticking to that.
I mean, that's a very healthy mindset. I need to adopt some of that Becker mindset when I go to the lake.
It's hard for sure. It's hard. I don't care what anyone else is doing out there. I mean, that's pretty much every day I go out on the water. I'm pretty only focused on what I'm doing. But especially when I'm fun fishing. Like, there was a few days on Watts Bar this fall where, they were catching big bags, scoping fish out, in the middle of the lake or in brush or whatever, and I'm up throwing a frog because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to catch them on a frog, so that's what I'm doing, and I'm going to get 10 frog bites when I could catch 30 out in the middle of the lake. Those 10 were more fun to me than the 30 I could have caught. So that's you just got to make that personal decision and roll with it.
Sure. Well, any last comments, guys, on the whole? We covered so much ground. I told you it was going to go in a million rabbit holes, and I don't even know what we accomplished from this stream. I think I'm just more confused than when I started this whole rant thing.
Nothing. We did not solve the world's problems in this stream. I thought we would. You told me we were going to, but we didn't.
I thought I came up with some good solutions, but I got shot down. I at least had some solutions. They just weren't very good solutions. That's the issue.
You got good YouTube ideas.
Yes. You have great content ideas, and it will definitely be successful.
Johnny, I'll do the wheel of, what do you call it? The wheel of lures? I'll do the wheel of lures challenge against you at some point.
Yes, let's go.
Yeah, that would be cool to see for sure. I would watch it.
I think that'd be fun. I have some other stuff up my sleeve that I think I've told you about, Matt or Stefan. I've told you a couple. I have a couple more ideas that I'm pretty excited about. One thing I'm trying to figure out, I do want to do a series called Hard Mode Fishing, where I'm going to figure out what the hard mode rule sets are, and I don't know what that's going to be yet. I think no forward facing, no A-rig is the start, and then I'm going to start stripping stuff away after that. So maybe it gets down to like 2D only. Maybe it gets down to paper map only. We're gonna strip it all down. Then we're gonna be like, okay, that was too hard. We're gonna go back up because fishing's hard as it is. Like, I don't want to make it too hard where it's just painful. Because like, yeah, you could just go to nothing, but I want to find that sweet spot, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you gotta let the people talk.
Yes. Oh, okay. Well, Stefan, anything you got?
No, I gotta get going actually.
Okay. Yeah, you gotta make dinner.
No, well, I actually have dinner plans that I have to be at 6, so I'm probably gonna be a little late now.
Yeah, he hung up on me yesterday to go hang out with friends, Becker. I was really sad. He just threw
Oh
me
my
under the
God.
bus.
No, I had friends that I haven't seen in like a year come over for dinner, and they walked in the door when Johnny called. So I told Johnny I'd talk to him another time.
Gotta go.
See ya. Anyway, it's all good. But thanks, guys, for being here till the end of this. This is 2 hours long. This was not expected to be this long. Actually, I kind of expected it to go this long. We didn't get to see if Spencer caught his fifth fish. I think he probably did because, you know.
Yeah, you owe me $10. I took the over.
Sounds
That's
good.
speculation.
I'll pay for a third of your dinner tonight because you know you're going to get steaks or something expensive.
I do like steaks.
Yeah.
Becker likes steaks too.
Oh yeah. I feel like
He's
I've
a
been
New
eating
York
like
strip guy.
a carnivore lately. I've been eating a lot of meat. Actually, I'm about to go make some Philly cheesesteaks right now out of some New York thinly sliced New York strip. Make some Philly cheesesteaks.
You want to go in on a half cow with me?
Yes, I would for sure. I've been looking at it. Yeah.
We've been thinking about doing that too, by the way. So if we,
maybe we'll buy a full cow. And we'll just go.
We can do a full cow. We just have to find one more person. Maybe Spencer will go in with us. One thing that comment said here is that we needed Todd Castledine here to really clear it up because he could definitely help clean up any confusions.
It'd be a 7-hour podcast.
Yeah, we wouldn't get a word in either.
Yeah.
Good deal.
Okay,
guys.
I gotta go.
Talk to y'all later.
See ya.
Yeah. See ya. Thanks for being on the stream, guys. See y'all later. We're good. Appreciate you guys joining in.